my novel Toxicology is pretty much set in present-day New York City, but it does veer off in a couple of different directions and travels back into the past at certain points in the book. And it tells the story of 3 generations of women who know each other because, well, they're neighbors in the West Village. And in this chapter, it's one of my trips back in time. The writer, 80-year-old writer, Eleanor Delacroix, travels to Mexico. Now, I'll have to share a little bit about Eleanor before I read this brief excerpt. She is a reclusive person in the present day and is in deep mourning, but she was once a celebrated author and sort of shocked the world with her short novels that were very frank and graphic. And she has become, and she's outlived many of her friends and lovers, much to the amazement of her doctor, because Eleanor is an unapologetic coke addict and alcoholic. In this scene, she goes to Mexico to visit her very dear friend, a great poet by the name of Felix Montoya. And I think that's all you need to know. This chapter is called Jaguar. Ixtlala was where I met and fell in love with Yvonne. I was old when I first laid eyes on her, not old, like I am now, but old enough to worry about making a fool of myself. Yvonne was 20 years younger, a restless beauty with terrifying eyes, a strong face and body full of life. 35 to my 55 back then, if you must know. I always thought she would outlive me. I always thought a lot of people I cherished would outlive me, as a matter of fact. Ixtlala. What exactly does it mean? I asked Felix Montoya. At one point in my life, I had spent a lot of time in Mexico, but the town of Ixtlala was new to me. A tourist destination high up in the mountains, approximately 23,175 inhabitants, one of its most prominent being moi, Felix said. He was toying with me, having a high old time. Felix, please. Ixtlala is impossible to translate into English. Try, I said. Serpent of the starry sky, land of mirrors, river of tears, and eternal remorse. Take your pick, Eleanor. Poetic. Well, it's the Aztec in me, darling. It was my first day there, and the altitude was giving me a headache. Felix wanted to show off by taking me to La Fonda, a former colonial hacienda that had been converted into a restaurant. It was his favorite place, he said. The service impeccable, the food to die for. I remember we had to dress up. We sat in the courtyard, knocking back shot after shot of pricey tequila reposado and sangritas. We were supposed to be having lunch. Solemn waiters hovered close by, anticipating our every need. Birds trilling in the lush, vibrant foliage. The sun shining, the Baroque fountain in the center of the courtyard gurgling merrily away. I feel like I'm in a movie, I said, trying to ignore the dull, persistent pain in my temples. You're not, Felix said, giving me one of those cryptic smiles. The walls are splattered with blood and too much history. But the waiters are sexy and cute, no? The young ones, anyway. He scanned the glossy, oversized menu. You must be starved, Eleanor. We should order some chilled pomegranate soup to start, specialty of the house. Felix gestured for a waiter, rattled off a list of delicacies, chilled pomegranate soup, followed by grilled shrimp and squash blossoms. The inevitable guacamole, freshly made before us on a heavy molcajete made of black stone, a basket of steaming tiny tortillas. How's the new book coming along? Huh, that's a deadly question for a writer, answered Felix, downing the last of his tequila. Let's talk about your love life instead. The town of Ixtlala was famous for its shamans and dream weavers and gringo expats and scorpions and packs of stray dogs and a spooky little pyramid tucked away in a nearby forest. Felix used to say that the forest was also home to an enigmatic, solitary jaguar. If you stay up late, Eleanor, you might get lucky and hear its howl. A howl like no other, he said. Felix was a firm believer in the spirit world. It was one of the beliefs we shared, though I didn't bitch and moan and brag about it like he did. Felix claimed that he'd not only heard the jaguar, he'd seen it. Of course, he was on a 3-day peyote bender at the time. The old shaman, Don Rufo, had been with him, acting as a spiritual guide, and so had Don Rufo's wife, Susana, a renowned weaver who went by the title Mother of All Dreams. They too saw the jaguar. Mexico was my first real lover, and as with all lovers, my relationship to it, it's complicated. I wasn't sure I wanted to return to Mexico, but at the same time, I couldn't wait to be there again. Felix had planned it so that I would arrive right before the Day of the Dead. He understood it was my kind of party. Skeletons of wood and paper mache, stacks of glittering sugar skulls everywhere you looked. The air perfumed with the pungent smell of marigolds, chocolate, copal incense, and bloody meat. Of course I stayed with him. Felix's house was painted a vivid pink, crammed with books and paintings, pre-Columbian artifacts, and back issues of Blue Boy and the New Yorker. It was lovely, but a little too private, located at the far end of town on a steep, winding road that ran all the way down to the market. Felix had assembled his own Day of the Dead altar in the living room. Seashells, candles, a toy airplane, a bowl of fruit, a bottle of tequila, and a vase filled with orange marigolds set before framed sepia photographs of his deceased grandparents and parents, and a framed snapshot of his younger sister, Alma, who had drowned while swimming in the ocean at the age of 14. In the center, a black and white portrait of Felix's great love, the Argentine poet Guillermo Ford. Ford had lived with Felix from the age of 20 until his death in a fiery plane crash over the Andes at 45. Felix flew to Buenos Aires to identify and claim Guillermo's body, since Guillermo's fascist family wanted nothing more to do with their faggot poet of a son. Felix described what was left of Guillermo as a slab of black coal. But don't get me wrong. Ixtlala's macabre atmosphere suited me fine. I've been thinking about death all my life. I've never been afraid of it. Dry your tears, dispense with grief, and throw a party. Bring on the mariachis, the boleros, and tequila. Get ready for the cleaning of graves, the singing, the sweets. Let us all die Mexican.